So hello, friends of the sun, friends of philosophy. We want to talk about Augustine today. And Augustine is quite an interesting person for the church, of course. So we somehow discuss Christian belief. And I think the idea is that God cannot be understood through reason alone. And that's a claim that we have to test for what he says, why that is. Augustine has produced an incredible output, and we are going to read his Confessions. So here we see a scene from Augustine's life. He basically followed the idea of writing an autobiography that we have already seen in a similar way with Mark Aurelius. But here he does not pretend to be a perfect being, but he actually confesses his sins. And one scene from that is that he always has problems and he tries to have chastity, but then he says, not yet, not yet. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump to the text, Augustine Confessions. And we have an introduction that is not what we are going to read, of course. We jump right to Augustine's testimony concerning the Confessions. So it seems he has written something before. Yeah, I don't think there is much importance here. It's just saying, okay, they are meant to excite man's mind, and then he does some corrections about the text. So I think we can easily skip this. Yeah, they have here a very brief summary of what he does, and mostly chapter 1 is a prayer, right? He just praises God, for thou hast made us for thyself, and restless is our heart until it comes to rest in thee. Okay, and what I find important here in this passage is that he says the way we can understand God is through the humanity of thy Son. So the idea that Jesus Christ becomes a human makes God actually graspable. And I think this is a very important thought here. However, I think the passage does not have to be studied in detail. Okay, then he goes on here with his prayer, and he actually raises some concerns. One of them is, how could God, the God who made both heaven and earth, come into me? Is there anything in me, O Lord my God, that can contain thee? So the question here is really, if God is all-powerful and made the universe, if it is the largest concept that can be thought, how can we think it? How can we reliably think it? How do we know that we don't fall for false God? I think these are important questions. Why then do I ask thee to come into me, since I also am and could not be, if thou wert not in me? So, and how can we be separated from God if God is everything that is made? Is God actually thought as completely, penetrating the whole universe? I hope that's not the wrong word. It sounds a bit false. So yeah, and he concludes, therefore I would not exist. I would simply not be at all unless I exist in thee, from whom and by whom, in whom all things are. So I think the idea here is that there must be a creator of the universe or something that has created it. And if that is the case, then we are a direct result of it. There's a godly touch of the things, and this touch remains in all things, and therefore we remain in God. That seems to be what he says here. So it seems to be the idea of a kind of cosmic God that is really everywhere at the same time and all at once. So yeah, and in chapter 3, he basically goes on in his prayer to formulate the paradoxes that God comes with. Since then, thou dost fill the heaven and earth, do they contain thee? Or dost thou fill and overflow them because they cannot contain thee? So the way I understand that is the question, okay, where is God? Is God contained in the things? Or is he overflowing and pouring out of these things? But if he's pouring out, then where is God if God is in heaven? And then he goes on to say, well, maybe we don't need to be maybe we don't need to have a God who needs to be contained by anything. Maybe it's just something conceptual, right? And so we proceed with some contradictions. But when thou dost fill all things, dost thou fill them with thy whole being? Or since not even all things together could contain thee altogether, does any one thing contain a single part? And do all things contain then the same part at the same time? So it invokes here a lot of theoretical puzzles that actually are very central to philosophy. This here is the question, for example, of being. If being is in everything the same part, which would be kind of a contradiction, a kind of famous contradiction, because then being would, for example, be white in a white thing and black in another thing. So there are a lot of debates surrounding this topic. But I think what he wants to say here is that it's just a huge puzzle, and God must be grasped as a contradiction. We see that in chapter 4. What therefore is my God, what I ask, but the Lord God? Who is the Lord but the Lord himself? Or who is God besides our God? Most high, most excellent, most potent, most omnipotent, most merciful, most just, most secret, and most truly present. Right? Okay, we have like first the general concepts that he's the most powerful, but then we have an interesting contradiction. We say, okay, he is most secret and at the same time most truly present. Like Heidegger would say about being, it's the closest and at the same time the farthest. So he is there, he fills up everything, but we just see things in our surrounding. That's what he's saying. Let's go on with these kind of contradictions that he invokes here. He is most beautiful and most strong, okay? Stable, yet not supported. Unchangeable, yet changing all things. Never new, never old, making all things new, yet bringing old upon the proud. And they know it not, always working, ever at rest. Gathering, yet needing nothing. Sustaining, pervading, and protecting. Creating, nourishing, and developing, seeking, and yet possessing all things. So God is all of these things, all of these contradictions. And I think what he wants to say here is that God already somewhat evades the powers of reason. And yeah, in the end of this chapter, I mean, he invokes more contradictions. He actually asks whether it's a flaw of human beings. Yet, oh my God, my life, my holy joy, what is this that I have said? What can any man say when he speaks of thee? But woe to them that keep silence, since even those say, who say most are dumb. Okay, I don't understand this one completely, right? But woe to them that keep silence, since even those who say most are dumb. So we should admire him in silence, is that what he's saying? But I guess there will be a twist to that again. So if they are in silence, right, he asks, who shall bring me rest in thee? Who will send thee into my heart, so to overwhelm it that my sins shall be blotted out, and I may embrace thee, my only good? And he says, have mercy that I may speak. So the person who speaks is dumb, but he cannot hold silence right now. Have mercy that I speak. So he now realizes that he is too little, right? He says, say to my soul, I am your salvation. Come to me, hide not thy face from me. But he has to realize that the house of my soul is too narrow for thee to come into me. Let it be enlarged by thee. And he says, haven't I already admitted that I'm not worthy of you? Have I not confessed my transgressions unto you, O my God, and hast thou not put away the iniquity of my heart? So he acknowledges here that he's a sinful being that cannot contain the greatness of God, right? He says that in the next chapter. Still dust and ashes I am. Yeah, I think we can finish here the first lesson on Augustine Confessions. I mean, I'm not an expert on that too, but I think I can say that Augustinus somehow wants to say that we cannot understand God by reason alone. So as we can really see, it's a philosophy of the heart. It's a philosophy of the heart that is, however, not superficial and simple. It's a modest philosophy. He starts with the most modest way by confessing that he is not enough for grasping God, and he's waiting for him. And I think this kind of openness is something we can learn from Augustine, even though we are not Christian, right? And I'm not Christian. I don't know whether God exists or not. It's a possibility according to my mind. I'm neither an atheist nor a theist. But I have this openness for somebody to convince me of that. Now, my gut feeling is that I want to be convinced by reason. But maybe that's not possible, and maybe something else convinces me, but I'm very skeptical about that. However, even if we are not Christian, we can see that Augustine here is meditating about the possibility of perceiving God at all. And he's an incomplete being, so how could he really perceive something that is complete? And I think he claims that Christianity has found the key to it. And other than other religions, he claims this is through the fact that God became human. Anyway, we finish here. If you like that and if you want me to go on with that, please leave a comment or subscribe. This channel is just for assisted reading of different philosophies. So that's what we do. We go through the texts and try to assist the reading of that. So if you like that, then subscribe. Other than that, live long, wonder more about being, and prosper.